It's like the things that don't matter just start to roll off a little bit more, and we become more easeful in the way that we navigate life. So that would be one thing. I like to say, you know, I give less shits about the things that don't matter, and the things that do matter, like I actually am more engaged in and have a better focus and concentration and more energy to invest into.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show Pritam Tara, and she is a transformational mentor and guide exploring the intersections of whole human health, yogic science, and the intentional use of sacred psychedelic medicines for healing, growth, and transformation. She is most recognized for her work pairing microdosing psilocybin with other spiritual, personal development, and nervous system regulation modalities, really to open up windows of opportunity and act as a catalyst for change. And we are diving deep into the topic of microdosing today. And I was so excited to have this conversation, something we haven't talked about on this show. And you know how I like to bring some maybe misunderstood or things that are so there's a lot of misconceptions about. And I think microdosing is one of them. And while it might have certain stigmas in some schools of thought, Pritam really talks about the science behind it and really how it's helping mental health and social connectivity and healing and neuroplasticity. And there's so many benefits. So she is going to go through the science, how it works, different options, how to do it, why to do it, and really how it's helping people heal on a whole new level. Such a fun conversation. Let's jump in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Pritam, and we are talking about microdosing today. And I was telling her before we hit record, this is not a conversation we've had before. And I mean, she's really an expert in so many things, which I know we'll touch on, but this was kind of the thing that piqued my interest and something that she's an expert in. So I'm so excited to bring this conversation to the show. Thanks so much for joining us today, Pritam.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Excited to delve into all things microdosing and to see where the conversation flows.
Totally. Me too. So I kind of want to get into your story and kind of how you got into this in a little bit, but can you just give, I guess for those listening who were already, you mentioned microdosing like 4 times now, and they're like, I don't even know what the heck that is. Can you give just kind of introduction of what you do, what your expertise is, and this, what microdosing is, how you use that?
Absolutely. So I am a microdosing and sacred medicine mentor. And the approach that I take to my work is very intentional and using these medicines in a way where they're layered in with other personal development work and other personal development practices, embodiment practices, and holistic health, just looking at a whole human view of health and optimal living. So microdosing is a super versatile and amazing tool that is used for a lot of different things. Most people come to microdosing because they're looking for relief from any type of like mental health symptoms. So depression, anxiety, social anxiety, stress, and other people come to microdosing because of the increased focus that it gives. It also opens up a lot of windows of creativity in looking at things a different way. And then also with the social connectivity aspects of it. So it can be a very pro-social medicine when used in the right way. So the right dose and the right setting with all of that. And microdosing by definition is by taking a subperceptual, so below perception, dose of psychedelic medicine. So typically the medicines that are microdosed with, most popular is psilocybin mushrooms. But there are people that are microdosing with medicines such as LSD or mescaline from the San Pedro cactus, ayahuasca vine, not the DMT containing part of the medicine, and other things. And you can really, like, I like to think of microdosing even like more holistically. So you can think of anything that you're putting into your system that's creating either like a psycholytic or psychedelic response. So you can think of coffee as a microdose. You know, if you don't drink coffee all the time, even having just like a little quarter of a cup of coffee, which you can consider a microdose of coffee, would create a very noticeable, very shift in your perspective and in your experience.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because, like, especially for someone like me, I am very sensitive to caffeine. So it would definitely give me like a different experience, even just a little bit. So that makes total sense. So when you're talking about microdosing, I would love to hear, because I'm sure you've heard it all. I feel like there's, it's kind of a new realm, I guess. Like I feel like it's kind of just now coming to the forefront, even though I've been hearing about it for years, but I feel like it's just not coming to the forefront. But there's a lot of misconceptions about it just from things that I hear people talk about. I would love to hear, that it's, you're working with illegal substances and this, things like that. Are there any like myths, misconceptions that maybe you hear about a lot that are worth debunking?
So to participate in microdosing, you can use medicines that are legal, that are perfectly legal. So it is something that one needs to approach kind of at their own comfort level and at their own risk, because the legality issues are absolutely real. So, when you're working with in most places, so the legality is changing all the time. And right now there are a lot of movements that are happening at the local city level or the state level in terms of decriminalizing medicines. So it's a rescheduling, moving them from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. And that's happening slowly in various places in the United States. So, you and I are both in the state of Texas, and that has not reached the state of Texas yet with decriminalization. So like I said, it's using one's own kind of comfort level and navigating this with a lot of discernment. So discernment in who you're talking to about these practices, who you're getting your medicine from, making sure that you're getting it from a really trustworthy source and that you feel comfortable and that your nervous system feels comfortable about how you're navigating these tools. And the last thing that you want to do is work with medicine that's going to actually create more anxiety.
Right, totally.
Something that you're looking to help reduce from working with these sacred medicines. So I say all that just to say it, but I do also want to add that there are medicines that are perfectly legal that you can microdose with. My favorite right now is Kanna. Kanna is a lesser known medicine. It's not psychedelic, but it is psycholytic. It does create a shift, and it's an empathogen. And an empathogen is a medicine that works on the heart, and it creates more empathy, but it's also a natural SSRI. So you get all of the benefits related to better mood, more creativity, more inspiration and energy, which is really beautiful. One of the interesting things about Kanna is it actually downregulates the amygdala and the activity in the amygdala, which is where a lot of fear comes from. So I find that people are much more, at a microdose, it's in a way where it creates this like greater opening and greater expression. And at a higher dose of this medicine, and with all the medicines that we'll talk about today, the effects are quite different.
Yeah, yeah, that's so fascinating. So when you're microdosing, are you getting like, do you have to be a doctor to prescribe these things? Like where are people getting these for like who is prescribing these doses and recommendations and all that for these substances?
Yeah, good question. So they're not prescribed through doctors in a conventional way because they are illegal substances.
Hmm.
For something like Kana, that is a legal substance, it is more of a natural intervention.
Right.
Conventional medicine, most doctors are not going to be even have this on their awareness, let
Right.
alone recommend it or prescribe it to a patient. So really, it's more holistic health practitioners,
Got it.
microdosing guides, microdosing mentors, psychedelic mentors. A lot of this is being, people find out about it mainly through word of mouth.
Hmm.
And the interest usually comes from somebody learning about it through an article that they read or a podcast that they listen to, such as this one,
Hmm.
or a friend that they have that has tried microdosing is experiencing all these incredible benefits from it. Or a lot of the times I'll hear from people that come to me, they had a friend or a family member who they just noticed such a big shift in the way that they were showing up in their energy.
Hmm.
And that made them curious. So then they asked, right? And that's how they learned about it. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways. It's absolutely a very much of a grassroots kind of a thing.
Right. Right. Right.
I always, recommend that people really try to connect with people in their local community. And not only then do you get to have a relationship with the people that you're working with and the medicine that you're working with, but then you also have that layer of support.
Hmm.
I find that is such a critical piece to the healing and the benefit that we get by working with these really sacred medicines.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. So when you're looking at, because you had mentioned earlier kind of like a list of different ones, and some of these I would love to kind of go into, maybe not, you don't have to get super nerdy about it, but maybe a little bit of the science behind like how some of this works, because you hear things like MDMA and ketamine and like these things that are like, can be really dangerous drugs if taken in obviously bigger doses. And it's a little scary. Like for me, like when I first started hearing about it, I mean, this was before this happened, but this is like totally off topic, but it is related. My son was in the hospital last year and he was three, maybe, yeah, he was like 3.5 at the time. And they had to give him ketamine to give him a spinal tap because you can't keep a 3-year-old still to give them a spinal tap. And it was terrifying. And I'm like, wait, you give a 3-year-old ketamine? And the doctor's like, yeah, it's fine. Like we do it all the time. And that just blew my mind. And so, you hear things about these substances that can potentially be dangerous and that are like, for him, it was like I mean, he was totally tripping like on the way out of that. So it was just crazy watching that. So my point is, you hear these substances and you're kind of like, oh, this sounds scary. Like this sounds like it could be dangerous. And obviously we're talking about microdosing. This is very small doses, but what is it that's happening in these psychedelic substances that's actually causing, um, like, how is this advantageous? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Wow, there are so many things to unpack there. That was like I could answer that 10 different ways. But I want to start out with the classification of these different medicines. So when it comes to microdosing is typically done with the classical psychedelics. So the classical psychedelics are psilocybin, mushrooms, LSD, mescaline, and DMT.
Hmm.
The similar thread that they all share, they're considered the classical psychedelics, and they work on the serotonin receptor systems. So they're serotonin agonists, which means that they all share the shape of the molecule of those four medicines share a similar structure to serotonin. So they can actually plug into the H2A serotonin receptor sites and then start to mimic the effects of serotonin in the body and the brain. And that's how that grouping of psychedelics typically works. And all of those medicines do have, slightly different experiences, but there is some commonality within all of them as well. And that class of psychedelics are truly the safest. And within that class of psychedelics, psilocybin mushrooms are the safest and the medicine that is at the forefront of psychedelic science and psychedelic research for treatment-resistant depression as a intervention.
Wow.
Yeah. Psilocybin I find to be the most versatile and really the best place for people to start when starting to explore this vast world of psychedelia. And there's so many medicines and so many, trip reports that you can find on YouTube, and everybody has their own experience working with them. So it can feel very overwhelming when you're first getting started. So my recommendations for anyone that's really new to this is to start slow, start low in your dose, and don't feel the need to really rush into it. The reason that the approach that I take with this work is to really pair it with other personal development modalities and embodiment practices like yoga and meditation. And starting with lower doses is because I want people to develop a relationship with the medicine and to be able to sit with it. And then you start to increase your dose above subperceptual and to develop this relationship and this trust muscle in working with it. And then should you decide that you are ready to work with a larger dose of medicine to do some deeper levels of healing, and we can talk about that too, if that's where we want to take the conversation, then there's a comfort level there. And you really primed yourself through the work that you've done at these much lower doses to be able to surrender into the experience. And that's where you really get the most out of the medicines. And when you hear of people having a bad trip, it's often because they haven't done a lot of that preparation and they're not able to fully surrender into the experience and let go. That's not to say that challenging content doesn't come up and that you have the opportunity to really go into some challenging parts of the psyche and explore, the depths of what it means to be a human being and to have consciousness. And that those can be very, very heady and heavy topics to explore. But that's also where a lot of the beauty comes from, the impact that can have on someone's perception of what it means to be alive and the meaning of their life and why they're here and the significance of that and the magic of that, which is, all things that can come up through this process.
Yeah. I think that's huge. It's funny. What's coming up when you were saying that. I was listening to this thing a couple of days ago, and this girl was talking about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And basically, I didn't know this part of it, but he Maslow's hierarchy, if you learn it high school psychology, you have your basic needs, your physical needs, and then your esteem, but self-actualization is at the top. And so he's saying you need all these other things before you get to this self-actualization. And she was saying that he actually stole this whole idea from this indigenous tribe, I think it's the Blackfoot tribe or something, where they had self-actualization at the bottom, where it's okay, this is where we start. When you have self-actualization and you feel value within yourself and you understand why you're here and you're providing value to the collective, that's where it starts. And I just, what you're saying there just resonated because I feel it's you're saying that piece. And it's like this microdosing is kind of pointing our psyche in that direction and that self-actualization part and kind of uncovering those pieces within ourselves.
I love that picture that you painted for me with that, because I really resonate with that, because it like flips the whole pyramid upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to do this deeper work where we start to get to know ourselves better and to really understand what our core values are and what's important, and start to build our life around our core values from that higher perspective, then everything else starts to configure in a different way.
Yep.
And what we once thought was important in terms of perhaps material expression, signifying value and signifying meaning in our lives, when we start to question that and start to value different things, then our life can significantly transform. And I think for the better.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it does. It changes your whole perception of why we're here and what we're doing and like what we're here to contribute. So no, I totally agree with that. When people are doing microdosing, and you mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but are there like, I'm not, symptoms isn't the right word. Are there signs of like, it's quote working, or like what are the kind of the like visible benefits that people experience as they, because you said start them out super low and you kind of increase their dose a little bit. Like what are the physical things, I guess physical mental things that are happening to them as they see like, okay, this is working?
Yeah. So it's different for everybody, which is part of the fun and the excitement in doing it. But there are a couple of things that I kind of prime people to just watch out for, because the benefits, some of them are more immediate and more pronounced, but some of them definitely are more on the subtle side. And one thing that I hear often, which is very common, is you start to develop more of a mindfulness without actually having to practice mindfulness around your experience of life. So there becomes some spaciousness around what's happening to you and how you're reacting and your immediate reaction. So either one, the things that used to really trigger you or bother you in the past, or maybe your partner, every time he would leave the lid off the milk or the toothpaste, it would trigger you, and all of a sudden you're just like, oh, no big deal. It's like the things that don't matter just start to roll off a little bit more, and we become more easeful in the way that we navigate life. So that would be one thing. I like to say, I give less shits about the things that don't matter, and the things that do matter, like I actually am more engaged in and have a better focus and concentration and more energy to invest into. So another one of the common benefits that a lot of the people that I work with report is this like greater sense of intuition and inner trust. And that shows up a lot in the consumption of the different foods that they're eating and the pull that alcohol has, or cannabis, or some of these other medicines, and they can be considered medicines in their own right, that they're playing in their life, tend to have less of a grip. And some of the things that we may turn to in our life as like coping strategies, whether it's food or alcohol or cannabis, that really tend to like bring our energy down, right? Almost like sedate us a little bit.
Yep.
And I find that with, the classical psychedelics, with mushrooms in particular, it's like they're making us more sensitive, opening us up more, and they're allowing us to become more sensitive. So it's like as we do that and we learn to trust ourselves more then it really works very well with the medicine.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that reminds me, I think the point I was trying to make before our technology really interrupted us or interrupted me. What I was talking about the mindfulness, but I feel like that goes with it too. Because when you're increasing mindfulness and you're doing mindfulness practices, it can help connect you with your intuition and all these. But I think with the point I was trying to make, I feel like the microdosing is kind of another avenue for that piece, and just really and I think that was where I was going. It was really connecting you more with your kind of inner guidance system, your intuition, or whatever it is you want to call it. But I love that, and I feel like that in and of itself could help so many. Because I know, like, people have heard that microdosing, that they have anxiety or they have PTSD, or there's these things that they've been struggling with, like mental health things. And I feel like that's what it is. It's kind of that disconnection from that part of us, and it's just putting those pieces back together. It's like reconnecting those pieces of that inner part of ourselves we've kind of become disconnected from.
Yeah. And the other thing at play with this is you hear that the neurons that fire together wire together.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to depression, when it comes to any type of repetitive behavior that turns into something that's unhealthy, it is, these are like the hardwired ways and patterns of thinking or of behavior, that are really hardwired. And
Right.
the medicine, it lowers our default mode network so that these like very rigid thought patterns and behavior patterns are less hardwired.
Right.
Gives us the opportunity to start making different connections.
Mm-hmm.
Also at higher doses of psilocybin and the other medicines, what happens is the parts of the brain, they actually open up for communication, the neurons to communicate between different parts of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a lot of the time you'll hear about people having these like aha moments and these and able to make new insights and connections into things that were already there. It's not that there's information coming into the system.
Yeah.
It's allowing our brain to actually piece things together in a different way.
Right.
The other really beautiful thing that's happening is neurogenesis. So neurogenesis is the growth of new neurons.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is there's this kind of byproduct of glutamate, which is another neurotransmitter that's involved in and activated. So the BDNF is like miracle grow for the brain. So it helps the brain create these new neural connections. And then with the lowering of the default mode network, not only are we, reducing these hardwired loops, but we're creating new patterns and on top of that. So it does make the things that we're doing that much more important. So we need to be more mindful and more intentional about the things that we are doing when we're introducing a microdosing protocol into our holistic practices as well.
Right.
Does that?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, you're literally like, it's helping you rewire your brain. That's it makes total sense. That's so fascinating to me. Oh my gosh, I could ask you so many questions about this. I do want to ask you though, because I know you have your own story. Everybody has their own story, and that's the part I love here is how the story of how we got into this realm. I'd love to hear what brought you into this realm and your personal story that kind of led you into the world of microdosing and all of this.
Yeah. So I know that you're a functional medicine person and into nutrition and exercise and all those things. So I'll start kind of far back. So I've always been into nutrition and exercise and being really healthy, but it was through more of the conventional lens.
Sure.
So back when I was a teenager and in my 20s and into my 30s, it was to be skinny and to look good, right?
Yep, of course, same.
I was doing all those things, and I also I was in the corporate world up until my mid-30s, and I had been numbing out a lot of depression and trauma from my teens and early 20s. So while I was doing all this healthy stuff every day, I was also binge drinking and binge eating. I was bulimic and I was super depressed. So in my mid 30s, I got sober. I was married at the time, and my husband at the time did not drink at all. He challenged me to stop drinking for 30 days. At the end of the 30 days, I would be awarded with a piece of jewelry from my favorite jewelry designer in LA. Come up on the challenge. And when I took that month of sobriety, the veil of depression that I had been really carrying around with me in my work field for close to 15 years started to lift, and my brain turned back on, and I had all this free time from the time that I used to be drinking. So I had always been, like I said, kind of into fitness and health, and doing gym yoga. But I hadn't really gotten into meditation. I hadn't really ever pursued like more of a traditional yoga path.
Right.
So the first thing I did was I started meditating and started spending that time that I was drinking. I started going to Kundalini yoga very, very frequently. And that was super transformational. I, for the first time, connected with my authentic self. I realized that my priorities were so out of balance, and that I had been really masking a lot of the pain through numbing for so long. So I really got committed to my own healing journey. And with that, I got the call to start sitting with sacred plant medicine. Ayahuasca was the first medicine that really came into my field. And immediately I knew like that was something that I was being called to do. So I started to make trips down to Peru and train with medicine and really do my own healing, like really get to the root of what was causing me to numb myself, and to the relationship that I had with myself was really the first thing that I needed to heal. So I had, for a couple of years, I was working with larger doses of sacred medicines, and, was continuing on that path, and continued to get a lot of experience in yoga, and started teaching yoga. And then right around the time that COVID happened, all of the community and all of the experiences that I were going to in the medicine space really stopped happening.
Right.
It was great in terms that it gave me that period of time to really focus on integration and to really channel all of the things that I had learned into ways that I could help others in the world. And I also just got this idea to, mushrooms were the one thing that I could actually have access to. And I started microdosing on my own. And immediately within, the first week or so, my mood totally shifted. I had more energy. I was being much more creative in everything that I was doing. And my mind was just blown. So I started doing everything that I could, really developed my approach to working with microdosing as an intervention, and then started introducing it to my clients, my beta clients, back in 2020. And then started seeing the amazing shifts that it was having with them too. And over the past few years have really shifted the work that I do to orient myself around using medicine, microdosing primarily, as a starting point for people who are just getting introduced to the world of sacred medicine, or who have been struggling and just kind of feeling stuck with other holistic interventions that they've been working with, and are looking for something to help catalyze another phase of their own growth and healing.
Yeah. Wow, what a story. I love all of that. There's so much there. I love that. I love a story where that your personal experience is like you've done all this through personal experience. Like you've had the transformation within yourself. You've done this on yourself and you've seen the transformation. And I love that. I love that you so what I'm just curious, were you when you decided to do it on yourself, were you like just kind of jump in, let me try this. But like, how were you scared to do it on yourself? Were you just like, let's see how it goes? Like, what was that thought process of like, I'm just going to do it on my own and see what happens?
I have always been very like self-experimental
Hmm.
and a little bit fearless in that sense. And I think, when I look back to when I started this path of working with medicine, I pretty much had nothing to lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Makes
didn't feel
sense.
like I had much to live for. And with that, like I was willing to kind of go all in.
Hmm.
I am like so grateful for my path and all of the experiences that I've had and all the things that I've tried. And when I look back on it, yeah, I definitely would have done things a little differently now, but that was my path.
Yeah, totally.
What I think is also really special about the times that we live in is that there are a lot of guides and there are a lot of mentors.
Mm.
And it's so valuable to, if you are interested in doing this work, to connect with people who have been there and have
Yeah.
had experiences, just to help give you perspective on other ways to do it. Yeah, after you drink ayahuasca in the jungle, a couple dozen times and experience iboga and toad medicine and all these different things, it's like a little bit of mushrooms, like a little microdose of
Totally. Yeah. You're like, what's the worst that could happen?
like this is like
Yeah,
but
totally. That makes sense.
but at the same time, I approach my microdosing practice with as much intention and reverence as I do sitting with a large dose of medicine. Like
Hmm.
it's the same elements that we're working with, the
Right.
same if you want to think of it in a spiritual way, like the essence of the medicine, like you are developing a relationship with it. And it's just teaching you how to live in a different way and how to
Hmm.
be your own healer and how to have a happier, more whole and more balanced life. And I'm just so grateful for the relationships that I have with the plant allies that I've worked with.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's such a beautiful story. I do have one more question that I want to ask you as we kind of wrap up here, but I would love for you to share with listeners just where they can find out more about you and working with you and letting you help guide them on their own journeys. If you want to share where they can learn more.
Yeah, thank you. So the main place is my website, which is pritamtara.com. And I have a bunch of free guides and resources on my website. Also shows all of the different offerings that I have with individual private work. I do some group programs and I also teach classes and do all kinds of cool stuff. So constantly updating my website. And yeah, and I also would love to offer a free guide to your listeners. I do have a special guide called Microdosing Made Easy. So I will share with you the URL to that.
Perfect.
It in the show notes. Or if any of your listeners want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to hop on a call and just do, a 20, 30-minute intro conversation to help answer questions for people about where they're at on their journey. And, if I'm not the right person for them to work with, then I have like a whole network of people who specialize in so many different flavors of this
Yeah.
work. Lots of great sisters in this community who are doing amazing work. And I would love to, yeah, just connect and point someone in the right direction
Yeah.
on their journey. And all of our
Yeah.
so uniquely beautiful. So
Hmm. I love that. Thank you so much. And of course, I'll put all that in the show notes for y'all so I can go check that out and the free guide. I love that. Thank you for that. The last question that I want to ask you that I like to ask everybody, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
I think the most important thing you can do to live with purpose is to take the time to get really clear on what is authentically yours and what your core values are and what you're here to do, and to make the space and the mental space to really find in your heart what's authentic for you, not what the expectations are from society or from loved ones about what they want you to be and what they want you to do, and to, have the courage to follow through on that. And it doesn't mean that you need to quit your job and start like a whole new vocation and pursuing your passion 100% of the time, and possibly struggle for a period of time to do that. But even just honoring yourself and honoring your truth by finding the time and making the time to spend some of your precious time and energy cultivating that and indulging in that on a regular basis. And then over time, it really will blossom into something that can have a greater place in your expression and in your life.
Yeah. Beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Pritam, for coming on and sharing this. This was such an insightful conversation. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and for everything you're doing in the world.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a fun talk.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I'd love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I can know how to provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics you'd like to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza, or you can visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.